On a radiant Sunday morning, sunlight poured through the towering stained glass windows of a historic church in Atlanta, Georgia. Inside, the sanctuary was packed with people. Families sat shoulder to shoulder. Clergy in their robes lined the front pews, and the air hummed with a sense of eager anticipation. Every seat was filled, and a steady murmur filled the room as attendees exchanged quiet speculations about what they were about to hear. Donald Trump, the man known for his commanding presence at political rallies and his larger-than-life influence on global affairs, stepped up to the podium. He wasn't accompanied by his usual fanfare or the roaring cheers of a campaign crowd. Instead, the setting was solemn, reflective, and intimate. As he stood behind the podium, Trump looked out at the congregation. Thousands of eyes were fixed on him, waiting for him to speak. But he didn't rush. He didn't start with a bold declaration or a sweeping gesture. Instead, he paused, resting his hands on the podium as he scanned the room. His gaze lingered, as though he was taking in not just the faces, but the hearts of the people gathered before him. The murmurs slowly faded, and silence settled over the room. The quiet was almost tangible. Then, in a voice that was unexpectedly steady and calm, Trump began to speak. "Many of you know me as a builder," he said, his tone measured and deliberate. "You know me for the skyscrapers, the golf courses, and the major deals. But today, I'm not here to talk about those things." He paused, letting his words sink in, and the room remained utterly silent. He continued, his voice carrying a gravity that felt unusual for the man known for his fiery rhetoric. "Today, I want to talk about a project far greater than any of those things. A project not made of bricks or steel, but built on values that endure through time, through generations, through every challenge we face." He straightened slightly, his hands lifting as he emphasized his next words. "Today, I want to talk about the Bible." The room seemed to hold its collective breath. It wasn't the topic most had expected from a man so often associated with worldly successes. Yet, there was no mistaking the sincerity in his tone. "The Bible," Trump continued, his voice steady and purposeful, "is not just my favorite book. It is the guiding light for me, for America, and for anyone who is willing to listen. If we allow it, it will guide us back to what made this nation truly great." Trump's words echoed in the sanctuary, filling the vast space with their weight. Those who had come expecting one of his signature bombastic speeches instead found themselves leaning in, captivated by the depth of his message. This nation was built on principles found in this book: faith, hope, love, resilience, he said, his voice growing just slightly stronger. "And as I've gone through my life, I've turned to this book again and again for answers, for guidance, for strength." He paused again, looking out over the congregation, his eyes locking with individuals as though he were speaking directly to each person. "In my life," he said, his voice softening, "there have been challenges that felt insurmountable, times when the odds seemed stacked against me, when doubt crept in, but every single time, I've found my strength in these pages, in the timeless wisdom and truth of the Bible." The room remained utterly silent. Even those who had entered with skepticism couldn't help but be drawn in by the sincerity of his words. "This is not just a book," Trump continued, lifting the Bible he had brought with him and holding it up for all to see. The sunlight from the windows caught its gilded edges, casting a warm glow. "This is a roadmap. It's a guide to living right, to leading with integrity, and to building a future filled with hope and purpose." The congregation seemed to lean forward in unison, hanging on every word. Trump's usual bravado was replaced by a quiet conviction that resonated deeply. "If the Bible has guided me," he said, his voice carrying both strength and humility, "then I know it can guide America too. But here's the thing. It's not enough to own it, to display it, to quote from it. We have to commit to it. We have to read it, learn from it, and most importantly, live by it. Only then can we build a future that is not just great but truly lasting. He let the words hang in the air, his eyes scanning the faces before him. The weight of his message seemed to settle over the room like a mantle of responsibility. Without realizing it, the congregation found themselves nodding along, caught up in the momentum of his words. And as Trump stood there, with the Bible still raised, it was clear that this was not just a speech, it was a moment that had the power to spark something greater. With a warm smile that carried both pride and sincerity, Donald Trump began to share a deeply personal story about his connection to the Bible. His tone was reflective, almost conversational, as he addressed the audience. "Years ago," he said, pausing for effect, "I was asked a simple question. What's your favorite book? Honestly, I didn't have to think twice. I answered right away, I love the Bible. It's the greatest book." His words lingered in the air, sparking a ripple of murmurs and nods throughout the room. It was clear that his statement had resonated with many in the crowd. But Trump wasn't finished. With a slight tilt of his head and a knowing smile, he added, "And let me tell you, I've written some pretty good books myself. You've probably heard of The Art of the Deal. It's a bestseller. But I'll say this, and trust me, it's not easy for me to admit. The Bible is even more important than The Art of the Deal." The audience chuckled softly, appreciating the light moment of humor. But as Trump continued, his expression grew more serious, his tone more resolute. "The Bible," he said, holding up his hand as though to emphasize its significance, "isn't just a book you put on a shelf or quote occasionally. It's a roadmap, a guide that helps me live right, lead right, and overcome challenges that seem impossible." He paused again, his gaze scanning the room, as though making sure each person truly grasped the weight of his words. "In my life," he went on, "there have been moments when the challenges seemed too great, the odds stacked against me. I've faced criticism, setbacks, and moments of doubt, like we all do. But every single time, I've turned to the Bible, and every single time, it's given me the clarity and strength I needed to keep going." Trump then took a step closer to the podium, his voice growing steadier, as if to underscore the sincerity of what he was about to say. "Some of you may remember a moment in 2020, he said, when I stood in front of St. John's Church, near the White House, holding up a Bible. That moment sparked a lot of discussion, and yes, a lot of criticism. But let me tell you something, it wasn't random. That moment meant something. It was a reminder that we are a great nation, built on the laws of God and the teachings of the Bible." The room was silent now, the audience hanging on his every word. Trump leaned slightly forward, his eyes scanning the faces before him, his voice growing more intense. "This book," he said, gesturing as though holding the Bible in his hands, "has guided me through the toughest moments of my life. It's been my anchor when the storms of life felt overwhelming. And I believe, with all my heart, that if we let it lead us, truly lead us, it can guide America through any challenge we face." He paused, his gaze locking with members of the audience as if he was speaking directly to them. His tone softened slightly, but the conviction in his voice remained unshaken. "This isn't just about me," he continued. "It's about all of us. The Bible isn't just a book for individuals, it's a guide for nations, a foundation for societies, And I truly believe that if we return to its wisdom, we can find solutions to problems that seem unsolvable. As the audience remained captivated, Trump's voice took on a more personal tone. "I'm not just here to share my story," he said. "I'm here to challenge you, to inspire you, to remind you. The values in this book, faith, love, humility, courage, are what built this country. And if we embrace them, they will build a future even greater than our past." At that moment, the room felt charged with emotion. Trump's words were no longer just a reflection of his personal journey. They had become a rallying cry, a call to action for everyone in attendance. In his powerful and thought-provoking speech, Donald Trump passionately articulated how the enduring values of the Bible are not merely personal principles, but the very foundation upon which a strong, united, and resilient nation can be built. Speaking to an audience captivated by both his conviction and sincerity, Trump shared 10 lessons drawn from Scripture, each deeply relevant to America's present challenges and its vision for the future. 1. Faith is strength. Trump opened with one of his most well-known quotes, "There is nothing stronger than faith." He began by reflecting on the tumultuous days of the COVID-19 pandemic, a time when uncertainty and fear loomed over the country. People were confined to their homes, hospitals were overwhelmed, and many questioned what the future might hold. Trump acknowledged those dark times, but emphasized what kept the nation grounded: faith. "Faith was the one thing that kept us from crumbling under the weight of fear," he said. "The Bible teaches us that when we trust in God, we can overcome any challenge, no matter how insurmountable it seems." He then quoted Psalm 23 verse 4, his voice resonating through the room. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Trump paused, allowing the gravity of the verse to sink in, before affirming, "It was this faith in God, faith in each other, that helped America stand tall in the face of adversity and move forward with determination." 2. We are all created in God's image. Drawing from the book of Genesis, Trump reminded the audience, every person has value, no matter their background or circumstances. We are all created in the image of God. He shared a heartfelt memory of visiting a homeless shelter in New York City. There, he met people who had lost everything: homes, families, and livelihoods. Yet, in their eyes, he saw something powerful: hope. "I saw resilience, a spark of faith that hadn't been extinguished," Trump recounted. "It reminded me that every individual, no matter how far they've fallen, is worthy of love, dignity, and respect." He stressed the importance of never losing sight of this truth, saying, "When we forget that we are all made in God's image, we lose the very essence of what makes this nation great." 3. Hope in crisis. Trump then turned to the story of Job, a man who endured unimaginable loss yet never wavered in his faith. He compared Job's story to the resilience of American families who faced natural disasters and economic hardships. "Take the farmers in Iowa," he said, "who lost everything in the 2019 floods. Their crops were destroyed, their homes submerged, and their livelihoods wiped out. But they didn't give up. They prayed, stood back up, and started again." Trump's voice grew steadier as he continued. "The Bible teaches us that hope is the light that guides us through the darkest storms. In times of crisis, Hope is what keeps us moving forward. 4. The power of forgiveness. We cannot move forward if we hold on to grudges, Trump declared. He recounted moments in his political career when tensions ran high, and the temptation to retaliate felt overwhelming. But he explained how forgiveness and compromise often pave the way for greater achievements. Referencing his historic negotiations with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, he said, "We had deep disagreements, and many doubted it would ever lead to anything. But I chose dialogue over conflict, and while we didn't agree on everything, it was a step forward." The Bible teaches that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, it's a demonstration of strength. 5. The importance of hard work. Trump quoted Colossians 3 verse 23, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart." He reflected on the workers who helped build Trump Tower in the 1980s. He described the tireless dedication of laborers who spent countless nights working to complete the project. These men and women weren't just working for a paycheck. They took pride in what they were creating. That's the American spirit. That's the essence of hard work. And it's also a lesson straight from the Bible. 6. Humility and leadership. Turning to the story of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples, Trump emphasized, true leadership is about serving others. He spoke of his visits to veterans' hospitals, where he listened to stories of sacrifice and courage. Leadership isn't about standing above people, it's about standing beside them, lifting them up, and making their lives better. 7. Unity and diversity. We are one nation, united, not divided, Trump declared. The Bible teaches us to love one another, no matter our differences. He pointed to the First Step Act, a criminal justice reform policy that provided second chances for those who had made mistakes. No matter where you come from or what your past looks like, you have the opportunity to contribute to your community. That's the unity and diversity that the Bible calls us to embrace. 8. Sacrifice for others. Quoting John 15 verse 13, Trump said, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." He honored the sacrifices of American soldiers, calling them the living embodiment of the spirit of sacrifice celebrated in the Bible. He reminded the audience that their bravery and dedication were the bedrock of the nation's freedom. 9. Trust in a greater plan. Trump urged the audience to see their efforts as part of a divine purpose. We do not work only for the present. We are part of God's greater plan. He recalled the ambition behind America's space exploration programs. Reaching for the stars isn't just about technology, it's about fulfilling a vision that's bigger than ourselves. The Bible reminds us that every great effort is part of God's plan to advance humanity. 10. Inner peace. Finally, Trump spoke about the power of peace. "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you," John 14 verse 27. He shared a rare personal moment, describing evenings in the White House when he would retreat to a quiet room, open the Bible, and pray. In the midst of chaos, the Bible has been my anchor, giving me a sense of calm and clarity. I believe it can do the same for every American, no matter what storms they face. Trump closed his list of lessons with a powerful statement. If we embrace the lessons of the Bible, America will not only be great again, but will be stronger, more united, and more hopeful than ever before. With a voice resonating with passion and purpose, Donald Trump began his heartfelt plea to the crowd. emphasizing the foundational role of Christian faith in shaping the identity of America. He stood firm, his gaze sweeping across the audience, as he declared, "Never forget the great Christian heritage that has formed the soul of our nation." The room grew still, as though every person present was leaning in, eager to absorb his words. Trump's voice softened slightly, taking on a reflective tone as he recounted the earliest days of America's history. From the very first days when settlers arrived on these shores, he said, they carried with them something far more important than possessions or tools. They brought the Bible, a guiding compass, a source of strength, and a vision for a society built on justice, freedom, and hope. He paused, allowing the significance of this history to settle in the minds of those listening. Then, with renewed determination in his voice, he continued, "America wasn't built on skyscrapers or laws alone. It was built on Christian values, faith, hope, and love. These values weren't just ideals to aspire to. They were the bedrock upon which our culture, our morality, and our future have been shaped." Trump's words stirred the room. Heads nodded in agreement, and a ripple of quiet applause began to spread. But Trump wasn't content to leave his message as mere rhetoric. He leaned forward slightly, his voice growing more resolute as he shifted from reflection to action. "Words are not enough," he said firmly. "It's time to act. It's time to bring the Bible back to the forefront of our lives, not just as a symbol, but as a living, breathing guide for our nation." He announced a series of initiatives designed to reignite America's connection to the Bible, starting with education and community outreach. His tone was both practical and visionary as he outlined his plans. "Every child in America deserves access to this spiritual heritage," he said, "not just to understand the history of our nation, but to gain the strength, the spiritual strength needed to face the future. Imagine what it would mean for our children to grow up with a foundation of faith, knowing they are part of something greater than themselves." Trump's passion was palpable as he spoke about ensuring that no community, especially those in underprivileged areas, would be left behind in this effort. In our schools, in our communities, and in our homes, we must prioritize these teachings that have sustained this nation for centuries. It's not about imposing religion. It's about reconnecting with the values that unite us, the values that have made America a beacon of hope for the world. He paused, his expression softening as he addressed the deeper implications of his message. If we want America to be not just great but truly sustainable, we must return to our roots. We must return to the teachings of the Bible that have carried this nation through war, through hardship, and through every trial we've faced. As Trump spoke, the room seemed to take on a different energy. It wasn't just a speech anymore. It felt like a rallying cry, a call for a national awakening. "When we return to faith," he said, his voice filled with conviction, "we don't just find ourselves. We rediscover the collective strength that has always allowed us to move forward as a nation. We rediscover the courage to overcome our greatest challenges and the unity to face them together." His final words carried a weight that seemed to hang in the air, charging the room with a sense of purpose. "America," Trump said, his voice unwavering, "will always be a beacon of hope to the world. But for that light to shine brightly and never fade, we must keep the flame of faith burning strong. It is our responsibility, our privilege, and our destiny to do so." The audience sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the full impact of his message before a wave of applause erupted. It wasn't just a reaction, it was a response, a shared acknowledgement of the truth in his words and the urgency of his call. Donald Trump, with the Bible firmly in his hand, stepped to the very front of the pulpit. The golden sunlight streamed through the towering stained glass windows, casting vibrant patterns across the walls and floor. The scene was almost otherworldly, filled with a reverent stillness. He paused deliberately, his gaze sweeping over the audience. It was as if he wanted to lock eyes with each individual, ensuring they understood the weight of the moment. He stood silently for a few seconds, the Bible held close, allowing the anticipation in the room to build. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a strength that resonated deeply, but also held a surprising tenderness. "This is not just a book," Trump began, holding the Bible up slightly for all to see. "This is a guiding light, a set of teachings to live by and to lead by. For me, it has always been more than words on a page. It is wisdom, it is comfort, and it is power." The room remained hushed, the audience transfixed. Trump took a step closer to the edge of the platform, his voice growing more impassioned. "In the toughest of times, I have turned to this book for answers. When doubt, uncertainty, or hardship have crept in, I have opened its pages and found what I needed: hope, strength, and peace. Not once has it let me down." He paused briefly, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. Then, in a gesture that seemed both symbolic and deeply personal, he raised the Bible high above his head. The sunlight caught its gilded edges, making it appear as if it were glowing. "If the Bible can guide me," he said, his voice steady and unwavering, "it can guide America too. But, and this is important, it can only guide us if we make the effort. We must commit to it. We must read it, learn from it, and most importantly, live by its timeless values. That is how we will build a future that is not just great, but enduring." The atmosphere in the church shifted. It was no longer just a gathering. It had become something far more profound. The words Trump spoke seemed to wrap around each person present, sparking reflection, emotion, and resolve. Trump allowed his eyes to scan the congregation, his gaze lingering on groups of families, veterans, and young people seated throughout the pews. When he spoke again, his tone carried the weight of a challenge, a mission he was entrusting to everyone in the room. "Remember this," he said, "there is nothing stronger than faith. Faith is the beacon that shines through the darkest nights. It is the force that helps us overcome adversity, the power that propels us forward when the world tries to hold us back. Faith is the foundation of all we have built, and it will be the foundation of all we aspire to achieve." As Trump's words echoed through the sanctuary, the emotion in the room became palpable. People shifted in their seats, some nodding fervently, others sitting still, deeply absorbed in thought. It wasn't just the words. It was the conviction behind them that stirred something within the hearts of those listening. A ripple of applause began, soft at first, but quickly swelling into a thunderous ovation. The sound filled the vast space, reverberating off the walls and rising toward the high, arched ceilings. It wasn't merely applause, it was a collective acknowledgement, a shared commitment to the truth of what had just been spoken. Trump stepped back slightly, his eyes scanning the crowd, his faces lit up with a newfound determination. The applause continued, and in the expressions of the audience, there was something unmistakable: hope. It was the kind of hope that doesn't fade with time, the kind that inspires action and change. The moment felt sacred, transformative, as if the congregation had been handed a torch to carry forward. And though Trump had spoken of challenges and hardships, his words left no room for despair. Instead, they illuminated a path guided by faith, by unity, and by the enduring wisdom of the Bible. Donald Trump's speech at the Atlanta church did more than just fill the pews that Sunday morning. It ignited a firestorm of discussion across the nation. Within hours, headlines blazed across newspapers, television broadcasts dissected his words, and social media platforms buzzed with reactions. Everyone, it seemed, had an opinion. For some, the speech was a watershed moment. Commentators on both faith-based and secular platforms praised Trump for delivering what they called a rare blend of authenticity and conviction. To these supporters, his message transcended politics, reaching into the heart of what America needed to hear. This wasn't just about leadership or policy. One commentator remarked during a primetime panel discussion, Trump didn't just call Americans back to the Bible. He reminded us of the values that form the very soul of this country: faith, hope, love, and resilience. The sentiment resonated deeply with many Americans, particularly those who felt disconnected from the increasingly polarized political landscape. They viewed the speech as a unifying message, a call to return to shared values that had long been the backbone of the nation's identity. Not everyone saw it that way. As expected, the speech drew criticism, particularly from those skeptical of Trump's motives. Some accused him of staging a calculated political stunt crafted to appeal to the Christian community. Was this truly a spiritual awakening? One prominent journalist wrote, or just another masterful performance by the king of media? Social media, too, was ablaze with contrasting opinions. Hashtags like #faith and leadership and #political theater trended for days, sparking debates that ranged from thoughtful discussions about the role of religion in public life to heated arguments about the sincerity of Trump's intentions. Despite the noise, one thing was undeniable: the speech had struck a chord. Beyond the headlines and debates, something more profound was happening. Trump's words had placed the Bible squarely back into the center of the national conversation. People who hadn't picked up a Bible in years found themselves opening its pages once more. Discussions about faith, values, and morality began to re-emerge, not just in churches, but in workplaces, schools, and around dinner tables. A community leader from rural Ohio shared in an interview, "It's been a long time since I've seen so many people talking about what the Bible says about hope, forgiveness, and love. Trump may have his critics, but no one can deny he's made people think." In underserved neighborhoods, the speech had an even more immediate impact. Inspired by Trump's call to action, several charitable organizations launched new initiatives aimed at bringing the Bible to those who needed it most. In Detroit, a faith-based nonprofit began organizing free Bible distributions in low-income neighborhoods. In Mississippi, volunteers started hosting weekly Bible reading sessions for children at community centers. And in Kansas, a small public school teacher shared how the speech had renewed her purpose. "The speech reminded me why I started teaching moral values from the Bible," she said in a local interview. "It's not just about religion. It's about teaching kids how to live responsible, meaningful lives." These lessons transcend faith, they're universal. When asked about the overwhelming reactions to his speech, Trump's response was characteristically direct but filled with emotion. If that speech made even one person pause, reflect, and turn back to faith, then I did the right thing. And if it made millions think, even better. For his supporters, those words were more than an acknowledgement, they were a rallying cry. They believed Trump had not only reminded Americans of their shared spiritual heritage, but had also reignited a national conversation about the role of faith in shaping the country's future. Trump's speech had achieved what few political moments could. It left an indelible mark on the cultural and spiritual fabric of the nation. While critics debated his motives and supporters praised his courage, one truth became increasingly clear. The Bible was no longer just a relic of the past. It had become, once again, a guiding light for the present.